Hi, this is AP and DP, SEC, ACC conference coverage. I'm AP Stedham, multimedia personality from LA, Lower Alabama, along with my co-host DP, Doug Parrish, former University of California defensive back extraordinaire. Hey, Doug, how are you this week?
Hi, AP. It's so good to be with you again, man. This is so great. A lot of fascinating, amazing football happening around the country. Don't you love it, man? It's just so exciting.
Yeah, and it involves the SEC and the ACC. We have 13 teams from the SEC in the postseason, playoff or bowl games, and I believe that's matched by the ACC with two teams in the playoff and 11 teams in the bowls. The SEC is three teams in the playoff, 10 teams in the bowls. So I guess we should get right to it. What do you think, Doug?
Absolutely, AP. We're going to kick it off with the SEC, right? You're going to go ahead and let us know who's going to be in these
Yeah,
big games for the postseason.
right.
So
We have
excited.
Yeah, we have Georgia. They'll have the week off because they're have a first round bye. But we have Texas at number 5, playing number 12 Clemson out of the ACC, and that game will be in Austin, Texas. Now, Doug, from the Texas perspective, I think there's quite a bit of pressure on them because they've been challenged by Georgia twice, came up short both times, once at home, once in the championship game in Atlanta. Can they muster enough offense to beat Clemson? Uh, Quinn Ewers, he's a good quarterback. He has a capable set of receivers and running backs. The offensive line, twice they were shredded by the Georgia defense. 13 sacks in 2 games, 7 in the first, 6 in the second. So they have to do a better, uh, execute better on the offensive line to protect their quarterback. Defensively, Texas is usually pretty good, but Georgia found enough points to win that ball game twice, 30 on the at home in Austin there, and then I think it was 22 or so on down the road in Atlanta, whatever that number was. But anyway, so Texas is a team. They're favored by I think it's 12 points, Doug, to beat Clemson. Clemson, Doug, I'll let you discuss them.
Yeah.
But I think there's an interesting just for the fact that their quarterback Cade Klubnik is from Austin, Texas, and has played in that stadium and has defeated Quinn Ewers a couple of times in high school.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of exciting things are happening around the ACC, AP. I was just last night at the LA Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Gronkowski of all people. He's the
Right,
host of the bowl, man. It was such an amazing experience, particularly being in SoFi Stadium, which is one of the
right.
most brilliant stadiums that they've built in the NFL
Mm-hmm.
in years. I believe it's in the billions. And California was playing against none other than the 24th ranked UNLV running Rebels, who had an amazing season this year, AP, as you may know. They finished
Yeah.
their season with 10 at a 10-3 season, only losing to a few dynamic teams throughout the league. And I tell you
Mm-hmm.
right now, California, they finished 6-6. The game was interesting from the beginning. Both of these teams were trying to stay relevant, if you will. But just the overall experience of postseason bowl mania was just underway. Grunk had the wrestling belts. I mean, it was just a fantastic game. And Cal ended up losing their starting quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, in the transfer portal
Right.
earlier last week. So a lot of these teams also, AP, that I'm seeing either in the ACC or the ACC, some of these teams are losing players, some of them are receiving players, and we'll get a little bit more into that as we dive into these other teams. But for the most part, the LA Bowl was a great bowl, and the next game that we'll have is besides the playoff games for the college football playoffs will be the Game Above Bowl, which will be held in Detroit, Michigan, and that will be Pitt versus Toledo. So, in terms of the top two teams that will be playing in the postseason, I have California and Pitt. and I'll throw it back over to you for the SEC.
Yeah, we would want to get back and stay on the course with the playoff games before we move into those bowl games, Doug. We have, like I said, it'll be Clemson from the ACC facing Texas. Texas is a 12-point favorite. Some of the numbers, Clemson's averaging 35 points a game, Texas 33. Texas has 38 sacks and tackles for loss 80. Clemson is 33 sacks, tackles for loss 71. But it'll be a good matchup. Dabo Swinney's been in the playoffs many times.
Right.
Texas, they were in the playoff last year, lost in the semifinals to Washington. So now we want to move on to the second game involving the SEC and the college football playoffs. Tennessee, the number 9 team, will be traveling to Columbus, Ohio to take on the Ohio State Buckeyes. I think once again, the pressure is great on the home team, Ohio State, because they're coming off the loss to their arch rival, Michigan, where they were heavily favored and shut out in the second half with all that high-priced offense. Okay. They call them the $20 million team. But Tennessee has a recipe, I believe, to give Ohio State fits, because you have Dylan Sampson, 1,400-plus yards rushing, 22 TDs. He's an exceptional running back, one of the best in the country. And Tennessee's offense, believe it or not, 232 yards rushing, 231 yards passing. And Nico Iamaleava is a sensational athlete, but he hasn't performed as well in the passing game, but he's improving. He's improved through the season, so he could have a big game on the road, being colder weather. Tennessee has been in the 20s. They've been practicing in the morning, so I don't think the 20-something degree temperature is going to affect Tennessee traveling up north. So you have Will Howard as a quarterback for Ohio State. They have the 2 sensational receivers, the freshman Jeremiah Smith, 6'3" or so, tremendous hands, athletic, and Emeka Egbuka. They both have caught 57 passes for Smith, 60 for Egbuka. And then they have Quinshon Judkins, the transfer from Ole Miss, 800 and something yards. Trevion Henderson, 750-plus yards. Some of the receivers for Tennessee, Brew McCoy has 35 catches for 2 TDs, 400-plus yards. Squirrel White, 33 catches, 300-plus yards. And then the kickers, Max Gilbert, 19 for 25 for Tennessee, 52 for 52 in extra points. And then the Ohio State kicker, Jaden Fielding, who did not have a good game against Michigan, 9 for 12, 54 for 54. So those are the 2 playoff games involving the SEC and, of course, the one ACC team, Clemson. But
yeah, and you take a look at, back to the ACC, you're looking at number 11 ranked SMU, who finished the season 11-2 AP, going up against Big Ten superior talent of Penn State, who's 11-2. They're ranked number 6 in the country, AP. I tell you right now, it's going to be a really, really cold game for the SMU Mustangs. It's going to be interesting. Penn State traditionally is at the top of the heap when it comes to Big Ten ball. So we'll see how that game shakes out. I know Coach Lashley has his team, really pumped up. They really got into the college football playoffs. They lost to Clemson in the ACC championship game, but they were just as good enough to play. They're good enough to play against any team that's in the top 10 teams in the country for sure. And so we'll see if they can ride their Mustang all the way to victory against the Penn State Nittany Lions.
Yeah, SMU is a good football team. They know how to win. They came up short, and Clemson, they took them to the wire with the 56-yard walk-off. You were covering that game, Doug.
Sure.
So, but the teams that have the byes, Georgia, Arizona State, Boise, and what's the last team has the bye there? I forgot now. But anyway, they're going to be playing in the bowl games next year, next week, the following week, Fiesta Bowl, the Peach Bowl, the Sugar
Orange
Bowl.
Yeah.
The Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl will have the semifinals 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now, it'll be in the Cotton Bowl. Orange Bowl. The Rose Bowl is the game I was mentioning.
Sure.
The quarterfinals is the Rose Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, Sugar Bowl, and the Peach Bowl. So
Yeah.
it's hard to keep them all in line, but it's going to be great to have these teams play. One more thing about the Clemson Texas game, they've never played. Those two programs never played before. And the Tennessee Ohio State game, Tennessee leads that series 1-0. They played in the mid-90s in I believe it was the Citrus Bowl. Yeah. So, but that's why another reason I enjoy these playoffs, because some teams who have rarely played or have never played each other will now be meeting in these college football playoffs, Doug.
And what's interesting, AP, sticking to that Clemson game,
Right.
we were chatting earlier about like some of the storylines that are coming out right now. And as you may know, Clemson just got a non-quarterback, new person that's coming on board for Clemson
Transfer.
to go to. Yeah, transfer.
He'll be down the road, but he's transferring. Yeah, he can't play in this particular game, but that's a big positive for the Clemson Tigers to get a receiver. Tall. I think he's about 6'5", caught 70+ passes.
Yeah.
What did he come from?
Some yards.
Where did he come from? Southeast Missouri? Was that right? Right. Something like that. Yeah. So, but that's the first non-quarterback transfer in the Clemson program, which is quite unique. I'm not sure if there's anybody that can make that statement that they've only had a couple of quarterbacks transfer into their program. This is the first one as a non-quarterback. I don't think there's any school in America out of the 133, 134 FBS schools that can make that statement besides Clemson. That's interesting.
Yeah,
and Doug,
AP, so Doug,
Doug, I just want to mention one more thing about the Clemson game. We mentioned Cade Klubnik from Austin, Texas, and I'm sure Dabo has had this conversation with him to remember your function and your responsibility is to play quarterback. You don't need to go beyond that scope of your talent and skills. Just be the leader for your team. I would say don't try to take on too much because you're playing in your home state, your hometown of Austin. So I think that could be an issue with a quarterback that's returning to his home state, his home city. He feels that burden of trying to do too much. Just stay within your capabilities, and you'll be fine. You'll lead your team and just retain possession of the football. Right, that's the big thing. No turnovers. Right.
AP, you're absolutely right on target. Most of the times when folks go home, they want to show out for family and friends. Hey, block that out. That's just noise. Go out there and do what you do. One game, one play at a time, and make it happen. And so, it's amazing. And this is great because, what we're doing this season, AP, is spectacular. We're covering two of the most dynamic conferences in the country with the ACC and the SEC. And as you know, anything can happen on any given Saturday. So, I know that there are some marquee matchups that are coming up. There's some surprises here and there. From the playoff standpoint, what are some big picture takeaways that you think are happening around the league right now?
The college football playoffs, you have we'll mention the other games as well. Have Indiana playing against Notre Dame. That's a cold weather game. The SMU Penn State is a cold weather game. The Tennessee Ohio State is a cold weather game. So 3 out of the 4 opening round college football playoff games could be affected by weather. I think for one game, Doug, if you're from Dallas, Texas, it gets cold in Dallas, not Pennsylvania cold probably, but I think you can manage for one game to set that aside and mentally focus on the challenge of beating Penn State. And then the game in Austin, I don't know the weather exactly, but I'm sure I don't think the temperatures will reach that level in Austin, Texas. But you're probably looking at all 3 games, Tennessee, Ohio State, Indiana, Notre Dame, and SMU Penn State probably played in the 20s. I'm thinking maybe there's a little snow involved as well. So I think that's fun to see. Yeah, because most of the time, the elements, because most of the time the big bowl games, they've always been played down south in pretty good weather normally. Not, I mean, because the Cotton Bowl, I've seen that have disastrous weather. I mean, it even snowed in the Sugar Bowl 1962 season when Alabama played Ole Miss. Actually, there was actually snow on the ground. They moved it to the side. So even if they had the games in the South, there has been some weather through the years, but It's
Yeah.
unexpected. It's not natural. It's not normal, the normal
Yeah.
temperatures. But so 3 out of the 4 first round games will be, I think, in the 20-degree range to compete. But anyhow,
Yeah.
Doug,
Well,
I was just go ahead.
let's take a look at some of these other bowls that we have coming up, AP.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'll just go through them briefly,
Yeah.
Doug. The SEC teams, they said there's 10 teams. So it's 13 teams total in the playoffs and the bowl game for the SEC, 13 out of the 16. The only 3 teams remaining home will be Auburn did not make a bowl. Kentucky did not make a bowl. Mississippi State. So we have the first one in Tampa, Florida versus Tulane. We have in Fort Worth, Oklahoma versus the Navy, and Birmingham, Vandy versus Georgia Tech from the ACC. We have on the 27th in Memphis, Arkansas versus Texas Tech. We have in the Las Vegas Bowl, Texas A&M versus USC. We have in Nashville, Missouri versus Iowa. In Tampa on the 31st, we have Alabama versus Michigan. On the 31st in Orlando, South Carolina versus Illinois. On the 31st as well in Houston, LSU versus Baylor. And on the 2nd of January in Jacksonville, Ole Miss versus Duke. There'll be some interesting games. Just for instance, I'll give you the Houston game. LSU, they're playing against Baylor. The coach is Dave Aranda for Baylor. He was a defensive coordinator on the championship team for LSU. What happened a few years back. I know South Carolina, Doug, they're going to bring a lot of fans to Orlando. Those people in Orlando, I think they made the right choice by bringing in South Carolina because they're very rabid fans. They're thrilled to be playing in this type of bowl. And Illinois, the same. Those are 2 similar teams, highly motivated. Alabama versus Michigan, a rematch from last year. The fans are not as happy, both teams, but I think Michigan is happy to be going to a bowl game, probably to be playing Alabama. This is the 5th time they were going to be playing in a bowl, actually, Alabama and Michigan. Texas A&M and USC, this will be the 3rd time they've played, so it's not very, very often. So I think Texas A&M, they're disappointed in their loss to Texas, didn't get them into the SEC championship. But I think they'll be motivated to play. USC, they're just trying to get through the season. I believe they'll get 6-6. Very disappointed. Arkansas, they're traveling to Memphis right next door, so they'll bring some fans. I mean, I know they're not happy. They wish they won a few more games. Vanderbilt, we know that they're delighted to be playing in a bowl because last year they didn't win a game in the conference. And then Georgia Tech, they had that tough eight overtime loss to Georgia to end the season. So that's over in Birmingham. Both cities are close. Nashville, you coming south. Atlanta, you coming to the west over to Birmingham. Fort Worth, you have Oklahoma. Disappointing season, but I think they're happy. They beat Alabama there near the end of the season. And then Navy had an excellent season coming off that game. I covered that game, Army versus Navy, with a big 31-13 upset over the cadets of Army. So Navy's really excited. I mean, that any academy is going to give 100%. Doesn't matter what they've done in the past. And then Florida, the Florida people, I think they're happy to be in a bowl game. Tulane played in the championship, the American Athletic Conference. So I think both teams are motivated to be there. I believe they are because, Tulane, just recently they've becoming a good football team and year in and year out going to a bowl. So I think the Tulane people are happy to be in a bowl. And the Florida people, I think definitely with Billy Napier, they played one of the toughest schedules in the country, and they're playing a bowl. It's right there in Tampa, so they'll have a decent crowd there. The Nashville game, Mizzou and Iowa, those are 2 teams out of the Midwest. Mizzou from the SEC, Iowa from the Big Ten, and that'll be a good ball game. I think Missouri's a little disappointed, but it's in Nashville, not too far away. And Iowa, those people travel well. And then in Jacksonville, we have the Ole Miss, who I think they're the most disappointed because they had a chance to be in the playoff and they lost early that game to Kentucky, who had 1 win in the conference. And then Duke, we don't know what's going to happen. They lost their quarterback, Malik Murphy, in the transfer. Had a great season. I think they were 9-3 with Manny Diaz, the head coach. So, but I think Duke is highly motivated to be there. I'm not sure about Ole Miss. So that's just a rundown of the SEC, the bowl games, Doug.
Well, I appreciate that, AP. And, it sounds like some wonderful games underway and will be coming up here from the ACC side. we have a couple of cold weather games, one being Pitt versus Toledo that we talked about earlier. That's going to be played in Detroit. And those are going to be 7-5 Pittsburgh against both of these teams are 7-5 AP. So it's kind of interesting to see that matchup. And
playing
then
the dome, right? Playing the dome there,
right,
Detroit.
Right, exactly, right. And you talked about the Birmingham Bowl with Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt, and those teams. Georgia Tech finished 7-5, and Vanderbilt 6-6. And that should be an interesting game that'll be played in Georgia.
Birmingham, Birmingham, yeah.
Yeah, Birmingham, pardon me. The DirecTV Holiday Bowl is going to be played out here in San Diego, California. Number 21 ranked Syracuse AP. They finished 9-3 this season.
Nice season.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Washington State, who they're playing, their opponent is 8-4. So, I think the Alabamas of the world have spoiled America in terms of one-loss seasons over the past few years, and the other big-time teams. But 8-4, 9-3 season, a school like Cal, Berkeley, or Stanford, or any of these other mid-range teams would love to have a season with 3 or 4 losses. But considering, as we discussed, this playoff scenario, the 12-team playoff scenario, is very delicate. It is very hard to get into the college football playoffs with more than 2 or 3 losses. It's just going to be very, very, very hard to do. Moving on to a game that's going to be in another cold weather area of AP, of Boston, Massachusetts, North Carolina, 6-6. So if you got 6 wins, you're getting in. They play against UConn, AP. They're 8-4. And again, we talk about these cold weather environments. It makes good for good TV viewing, and we look forward to a lot of the elements in a lot of these games. Now, the Bad Boy Morris Pinstripe Bowl is going to be played Bronx, New York City, AP, BC, Boston College, 7-5 versus Nebraska, 6-6. Now, both of these teams may say to themselves, hey, we're used to the cold weather, but hey, it's another cold game that'll be played in the Bronx.
Yeah, 2 cold weather teams. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And then we got going down south, Orlando, Florida. It gets a little warmer down there, I would assume. They have number 13 ranked Miami Hurricanes. They finished the season AP 10-2. Were not able to get into the college football playoffs. They won a lot of games this season by the skin of their teeth. Number 18th ranked Iowa State has, in their view, an amazing year. 3 losses for Iowa State. They were in the top 25 for the majority of the season. They finished the season at number 18. I mean, you can't beat that season that they've had. And so hopefully the Iowa folks will travel well down to Orlando, because it's not a long flight for Miami, of course. But that will be played on Saturday, December 28th, a couple of days after Christmas. Then we have looks like a doubleheader, though, on the 28th with the Military Bowl. That will be played in Annapolis, Maryland. North Carolina State finished 6-6. They'll be facing the East Carolina at 7-5. They finished this season. So North Carolina State, they lead this series, AP, 19-13. So it's pretty balanced in terms of them coming out on top, or predicting who's going to come out on top. But their last meeting was in 2022, so we'll see how that game shapes up. Then on the 31st of the end of the year, you got Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl, AP, which will be played in El Paso, Texas.
El Paso, Texas.
Yes, sir. So you got the 8-4 Louisville against Washington, 6-6. So this is their first time ever meeting, AP. So I'm looking forward to a really, really competitive game against those two teams. Let's see. We got the January 2nd game, which is the Gator Bowl, Jacksonville, Florida. You talked about that. Duke, 9-3. they don't have the quarterback. Ole
No,
Miss,
yeah,
we talked about it. I don't want to beat that horse too much, but that's their first time ever meeting, so it'll be an interesting game. And then
love it.
you have the Duke Mayo game, which will be in Charlotte, North Carolina, against the Big Ten 7-5 Minnesota, against the Virginia Tech 6-6 team. That's their first ever meeting, AP. So
I love it. I love these
ACC,
teams meeting for the first
SEC,
time.
man, we're balling. We got a lot of teams in these college football postseason bowl games. So that's amazing for these two conferences that we've been covering all season. And it looks like we're going to have some sensational football going into the postseason.
Yeah, I like the fact that some of these teams have never played. I love that. That's the most intriguing to me to have these matchups. Yeah. But so, Doug, these two conferences, I would say they had great seasons when you have 13 teams involved in the playoffs and or bowls. So, that's sensational. I think there's 17 teams in the ACC if you consider Notre Dame, I think, but
Right.
they just play teams in the ACC, and then 16 teams in the SEC, 13 are going bowling or in the playoffs. So I think they've had another successful season, both conferences.
Yeah. I'm sure both commissioners are pretty pleased.
I think so. I think so. Yeah. And Doug, we just have to mention about the transfer portal. All these things happening at once on the calendar for these coaches. You have the transfer portal. So you're entertaining and hosting prospects from other schools. You have high school players. You might be hosting and entertaining them as well. You have JUCO players. You're preparing for the bowl. You're preparing for the playoff.
College.
All
Yep.
within these next 2 or 3, 4 weeks. I think the
And you're playing in a
calendar.
bowl game.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think these coaches, and I don't know, I don't understand how the legislation is passed, and then you reach the month of December, and the coaches are voicing their objection to the transfer portal, preparing for the bowl and the playoffs, entertaining high school prospects, and the signing date, all within these next 2, 3, 4 weeks. How does that happen where they're not objecting to this before the legislation is passed? Not when it's upon them in the month of December. I don't really follow that
Right.
that
Well, I
sequence
think
at
the
all. It doesn't make sense to me.
the gravity of it, all being at one time, I don't think they really got a grasp of the complexity of how it was all going to unfold, and it's just, and it's a learning experience for the commissioners, for the chancellors at these schools, for the coaches as well. And then you didn't mention, the coaching carousel, right? The SEC is, they're holding suit on their coaches this year, as you mentioned. But at the same time, there's a lot of moving parts, AP, when it comes to these coaching positions. But there are some coaches that are on the hot seat, even though they didn't get replaced this year from the SEC. Right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, there'll be coaches on the hot seat of both the SEC and the ACC. North Carolina made the move to hire Bill Belichick. Mac Brown was there for a number of years, so North Carolina has a new coach. And the SEC, they held serve, and nobody has been removed. But yeah, the coming season, though, a couple of coaches, they'll be on the hot seat, as you mentioned. But anyhow,
and you were going to talk a little bit about the Heisman Trophy.
Yes. Yeah, we had the Heisman Trophy presented this year. The winner was Travis Hunter, the wide receiver defensive back from Colorado. I always express my vote. Once it's done, I follow the wishes of the trustees, and that's the way they want us to proceed. So my first place vote was to Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback of Oregon, who transferred from Central Florida, Oklahoma to Oregon, leading the number one team. He had a great year, so I thought he deserved my first place vote. My second place vote was Ashton Jeanty, the excellent running back from Boise State. He flirted with Barry Sanders' records, and it didn't matter the competition. He always played well and led his team to the playoffs. And these first two people that I voted for led their team to the playoff. And actually the third person, Curtis Rourke, transferred from the MAC conference I think it's Ohio University from Canada, and he led his team, Indiana. Think about this, Doug. Indiana is in the playoffs. Alabama's not. The
Yeah.
first college football playoff.
Right.
That can never be changed. That's
Right.
history.
Yeah.
LSU's not in the
That's why I
playoff.
love college
Okay.
football, man. This is
You know,
history.
yeah. Indiana out of the Big Ten is representing that conference. And that's
Yes.
sensational. They've never won 10 games. They ended up 11-1. So I
Right.
thought Curtis Rourke, he was he performed very well for the team, led them to the playoffs for the very first playoff ever, 12 teams, and he's leading the team, the Hoosiers, to the playoffs. That's the reason I voted for them. I'll just say this about Travis Hunter. He's a very good player. I would say that you played in the Big 12, and I know they were always touting their quarterback. Very good. Travis Hunter, very good. But they did not make the playoffs of their conference. Iowa State and Arizona State. Now, Doug, I don't know about you. Can you name a player from Iowa State? I can because I know of this person.
Yeah. No,
but
not the
you
average
can't.
person.
So you're. But what I'm saying is, you had these players that you're always touting as being some of the best in the country, but as a team, you couldn't make that. You couldn't make that league championship. Now he caught 90-something passes and missed a couple games. I looked at his average, 12 yards. I was not impressed with a 12-yard average per catch. I mean, tight ends average 12 yards.
Yeah.
So he compiled a lot of numbers, and he was one of the players that contributed to their wins. But I thought those other three players, in my mind, did more for their team.
Well, that's amazing, AP. I like to hear your justification of those picks. They did also have like America's favorite Heisman, and Genty did win that.
Boise State, he won the one vote. The fans, they vote collectively, and it's one vote. So he earned the one vote from the fans collectively.
There's a lot too, because the fans have a lot to say. Is, of course, you guys as writers have a great responsibility to provide your input as experienced, well-seasoned professionals in this industry. I would just say a lot of hype went around the Heisman this year. It was over the top in terms of, A-listers from Hollywood attending those games. And Deion Sanders has not only got his team to a winning record, but he also, missed the playoffs by a slim margin. But he brought a lot of notoriety to a team that was not in in everybody's.
I mean, I think it was all. Yeah, I think it was all hype this year. You don't play 5 games and people start saying, "Well, give that person the Heisman." No, we don't give Heismans for 5 games.
Right.
We give Heismans for the entire season and what you accomplished. This idea you have commentators on TV. Oh, well, get ready, give him the Heisman after 4 games, 5 or 6 games. No, you have to complete the season. What did you accomplish? Okay, they won more games at Colorado, no question. But my point is that Big 12 is not the toughest conference. You weren't one of the 2 teams. And it's Arizona State, Doug, picked last. Yep. And they won the conference. Okay. Yep. Now that's sensational. Sure. That's sensational. Okay. Yeah. Yep. That's an accomplishment. You're picked last.
Doing well.
You are picked dead last. And not only did you get to the championship game, you won the championship game. And then Iowa State. Iowa State is not a team that people, like I say, they can't name one player probably.
Right.
I mean, I know Rocco Beck, the quarterback. They played as a team. And Rocco Beck led his team.
This is a team sport, AP.
Team game, yeah. So we realized that the Travis Hunter is a good player. Nobody's denying him being a good player. But what I'm saying is these other players that I voted for, I thought did more for their team, led them to the playoffs. Indiana in the playoffs. Think about that. Indiana, I can't say that enough. Indiana in the college football playoff. Alabama's not in it. LSU's not in the playoffs. Texas A&M, Wisconsin out of the Big Ten, let's say, Iowa out of the Big Ten, those are teams that have winning programs through the years in the Big Ten. They're not in the playoffs. Indiana's in. And why? Well, in this quarterback-centric era, Curtis Rourke, he was terrific. Okay, he did more for his team, or as much for his team as anybody. You have to have a first place, second place, third place. So I couldn't put everybody in the first place, but I thought Dylan Gabriel, as a transfer, playing his first time at Oregon, undefeated, beat Ohio State by a point at home, and Genty, the running back from Boise State, he flirted with those and not only did he put up big numbers, his team's in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All those three players contributed enough to and they were the mainstays for their team, the stars of their team.
Absolutely.
And they made it to the playoffs. So that's why I felt strongly about my 3 votes. And
absolutely, AP. I'm not mad at you, brother. Those are some good picks.
So anyway, everybody has their preference, and that's the way I viewed it. And that was my perspective.
Absolutely, AP. You know, this is a lot. I mean, we do a lot every week. We try to bring all of our listeners, all of our sponsors, all our social media followers. We try to get them as much information as possible. AP, you know, I think that your skills and your knowledge is unprecedented. And I really appreciate you. I can't say enough about having you as my partner on this show. Man, have a happy Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Hey, from AP to DP, Merry Christmas. Happy holidays, you and your family. Thank you for those kind words, Doug. I really appreciate it. We've had a lot of fun. And we can't wait till these games are played, the playoffs and the bowl games. And I'll just say this particular season, Doug, to all the fans out there, with the transfer portal, you really don't realize if your team's going to be good next year, because there's going to be an influx of players to all these rosters. So just watch the game, enjoy your team, and have some fun. That's what I would say. But the Bulls are much different than they've been in the past. It's really not a true representative of the team that played all season, because there's so many people opting out and transferring. I mean, there's 15, 20, 25 players moving on. And so you have your team, you're rooting for your team, but you're saying, I better have my scorecard so I can know who's playing for my team, because so many players are on the move.
They are on the move. And next season is going to be super exciting to see who landed where, you know.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Okay. But anyway, so that's another edition of AP and DP SEC ACC conference coverage. And we thank you so much, and happy holidays to everyone. And we'll see you next week. Take care, Doug.
Take care.